This is BIA, Becoming in Action, a space to explore the lifelong journey of growth as leaders, as professionals, and as human beings. Through honest conversations and lived experience, we evolve with courage and intention. Here's your host, Sandy Abear.
Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. Today, I want to start with a question. When was the last time you had so much fun that you completely lost track of time? Not when you were just entertained, not just being distracted, not scrolling. I mean genuinely having fun, laughing, playing, feeling completely present. It's a question I've been asking myself lately, and it started with two completely unrelated stories that somehow collided in my mind. The first came from comedian Sarah Sherman. I heard her talking with Amy Poehler on her podcast, A Good Hang, about working on Saturday Night Live. Sarah explained that Lorne Michaels often gives her these wonderfully bizarre roles on Weekend Update. She'll play a squirrel or some strange creature, completely committing to the bit. She joked that Lorne probably looks at her and thinks, "What am I going to do with her? She's crazy. I'll just make her a wild animal." After one of those performances, Sarah said that Lorne looked at her and said, "When you did that, I could tell you were loved as a child." Sarah's response was that she laughed and said, "Oh, clocked." And I just can't stop thinking about that sentence. I could tell you were loved as a child. What does that even mean? Is there something about someone who's willing to look ridiculous, to be playful, to risk embarrassment, that tells us they feel fundamentally safe? Safe enough to be themselves. Safe enough to not worry about looking foolish. Safe enough to play. Then I started noticing the same idea somewhere completely different. I've never really watched The Bear. I've seen episodes here and there when Grant has come home and had it on, but I've never really watched it through. And I've been really trying to slow down and do a little less, so I've been watching The Bear from season 1. There's one character that just fascinates me. It's Pete. Pete is married to Natalie, or Sugar, and he almost always feels like he wandered in from some completely different television show. He is just this ray of sunshine. He is kind and steady and patient, and he just genuinely cares about people. He doesn't seem interested in proving anything. He is simply himself, showing up with the tuna fish casserole, showing up with this positive attitude. And what's remarkable is that he drives almost everyone else around him absolutely crazy. There's a scene where Pete has accidentally drank an Ecto Cooler that was mixed with Xanax, and he literally falls asleep on the floor. And Richie looks at him and says, "I just want to punch him so hard." Pete isn't doing anything. He's unconscious. And somehow his very existence is so activating. The more I thought about it, the more I realized Pete isn't irritating because he's annoying. He's irritating because he's so peaceful. The Brozzato family has experienced so much chaos, so much dysfunction, so much unpredictability that Pete doesn't make sense to their nervous systems. He's emotionally available. He assumes the best in people. He isn't constantly scanning for danger. He doesn't meet their intensity with more intensity. He just is. And to them, he looks a little silly, a little out of touch with the world. And watching him, I thought back to what Lorne Michaels said. I could tell you were loved as a child. Now, we can't look at someone and know what kind of childhood they had. Pete is a fictional character, and real people are so much more complicated than that. But I think both stories point to something similar. They point toward what it looks like when someone feels safe enough to be fully themselves. Around this same time, I listened to an interview with science journalist Catherine Price. She was being interviewed by Maya Shankar on A Slight Change of Plans, a podcast. And Catherine studies fun, actual fun. She argues that true fun isn't a luxury. It's essential to our well-being. And she says true fun exists when three things overlap: playfulness, connection, and flow. Playfulness means letting go of perfectionism. Connection is sharing authentic experiences with other people. And flow is this wonderful state when you're so immersed in something that time disappears. And when those three things come together, we don't just enjoy ourselves. We feel restored. Then she talks about fake fun, scrolling social media, mindlessly watching television, the kind of activities that seem relaxing but somehow leave us more depleted than when we started. That distinction really struck me because I started asking myself, where do I experience true fun? I have flow. I absolutely have flow. I lose myself when I'm cooking, when I'm writing, when I'm creating, when I'm exercising, when I'm recording this podcast. I also have connection. I love deep conversations. I love hearing people's stories. I love sitting across someone and watching them discover something about themselves they haven't seen before. But play? That one gives me pause. Because I realize that almost everything that I do because it has a purpose. Cooking feeds people. Writing creates something. Exercise improves my health. Coaching helps people grow. Podcasting serves an audience. The things I love usually have a productive outcome attached to them. And I remember in my 30s, there were multiple opportunities for me to golf, to take up golfing as a hobby. And I wholeheartedly rejected golf as a potential hobby for me. I distinctly remember saying, there is no way I'm going to spend 4 hours doing something that does not produce anything. And it's not even exercise. I can't even count it as my exercise. It's not going to happen. So I've consciously chosen activities with outcomes for a long time. What do I do that's just for fun? And it's been so hard for me to answer, like shockingly difficult. Like, what do I simply do because it's fun? Not because it's useful, not because it accomplishes something, just because it brings me joy. And I struggled. Now I can absolutely be playful. I name my plants. I named my sourdough starter Taylor Swift, and I have a whole play on words around that. I do laugh at myself a lot. And I think I have come a long way. 20 years ago, you would have met a much more serious version of me. I always wanted to appear competent, professional, and put together. I spent a lot of time and energy worrying about what people thought. And age and probably therapy has softened that. I am much more willing to laugh at myself now. I'm much more willing to be seen. And I've become far more interested in experiences than appearances. But I'm still noticing that I don't make a lot of room for play. One thing that popped up for me is I do really like to put together a jigsaw puzzle. But even that, I have to be multitasking. I'm usually listening to a podcast or a book and putting that together. But it is less task-oriented in that once it's done, I just take it apart. So I kept digging around memories, like what do I do that's just for fun? And the one thing that I keep coming back to is when we owned our boat, Beginner's Luck. We had it for 5 summers, and I really loved those days. Not because I was accomplishing anything, because I wasn't. Gerard was. He was always working on the boat. But I just loved being out on the water, the sun shining, friends laughing, music playing, no agenda. I didn't have to create the experience. I simply got to be part of it. And looking back, I think a different version of me showed up there. A lighter version, a more carefree version, a more playful version. And then I thought about the theme parties that we have thrown. I love entertaining because I love community and I love feeding people. I love creating spaces where people feel welcome. But there's a purpose behind all of that. And then Gerard threw my 50th birthday party. I hate surprises, but Gerard really felt strongly that he and my friends wanted to throw me at least a quasi-surprise birthday party. The compromise was I knew the day and time of the party, but everything else was going to be a surprise. I was in charge of appetizers, but everything else about the party was 100% on Gerard and the party planning committee that he formed. They had several in-person meetings where they worked through all of the design and logistics. And the day of the party, he had Alyssa, who does my hair, come over and do my hair and makeup. He purchased my dress. I went upstairs in our bedroom and stayed up there for several hours while they decorated and put everything together. And what I walked down into was a fantastic Roaring 20s party. I would never, ever have planned this party. It felt impractical. It felt extra, a little bit ridiculous. But the dress he got me was fabulous. The first people to arrive were my mom and dad, and they were not dressed for Roaring 20s. They were dressed in their everyday clothes. And my mom was a little incredulous. She's like, are people really going to dress up? And I just said, I have no idea, Mom. We'll see. And it was such an awesome experience because everyone leaned in. People dressed up. They committed to the theme. There were wigs. There was jewelry. There were costumes. Everyone laughed and played. And there was just something magical about giving adults permission to be silly together. And it made me wonder, if we're all starving for that? Not just fun, but permission. Permission to stop performing adulthood for a little while. And we've gone on to have many other theme parties, and it's been such a special part of our hosting. The more I sat with all of this, the more I realized this isn't really a podcast episode about fun. It's an episode about reinvention. Because I think many of us approach reinvention the same way we approach everything else. With effort, with discipline, with productivity. We make plans, set goals, build habits. And don't get me wrong, those things matter. But maybe they're only part of the story. Children don't discover who they are by creating strategic plans. They discover who they are by playing. They try things. They imagine. They pretend. They experiment. They find themselves through curiosity. And somewhere along the way, many of us stop doing that. We become efficient, responsible, productive. Every hour needs a purpose. Every hobby needs an outcome. Every experience needs to justify itself. And maybe that's why reinvention can feel so hard. We're trying to discover someone new while using the same strategies we've always used. Maybe the next version of ourselves isn't waiting on the other side of more effort. Maybe she's waiting on the other side of curiosity. Maybe she's waiting for us to try something simply because it sounds delightful, because it sounds interesting, because it sounds fun. And maybe that's what Pete represents. Not perfection, not an easy life, but someone whose nervous system has enough room for kindness, enough room for curiosity, enough room for play, enough room to simply be himself. Sometimes becoming more grounded won't make everyone around us more comfortable. Sometimes your peace reminds someone else how accustomed they've become to chaos. Sometimes your joy reminds someone else how long it's been since they laughed. That's okay. Your job isn't to manage someone else's discomfort. Your job is to keep becoming more fully yourself. So lately, I've been asking a different question. Not what's the most productive thing I could do today. Not even what's the right thing for me to do. I've started asking what sounds fun. It's such a simple question. And surprisingly, it's one I've rarely asked myself. Maybe I need more of it. Maybe we all do. And yesterday was Jordan and I's 21st wedding anniversary. Last year, we went to Italy for our 20th anniversary, and this year, you're keeping it low-key. And George said, "What do you want to do this weekend?" And I said, "I want to have fun on Saturday." And I kind of want it to be reminiscent of us going to the boat. Being outside, in the sunshine, no agenda. And being the great guy that he is, he's booked us a trip to Cancun. And we leave tomorrow. And I'm so excited. I can't wait. It's going to be a fabulous 5 days. Now, having fun can't always be as big as flying away on an impromptu vacation. But this time it is, and I'm really, really grateful for it. So as you move through your day or week, you might want to ask yourself a few questions. When was the last time I had so much fun that I lost track of time? Where do I experience playfulness, connection, and flow? What do I do simply because I enjoy it? If I stopped worrying about being productive for one afternoon, what would I choose? And what might be possible if I gave myself permission to play again? Because maybe reinvention isn't always about becoming someone different. Maybe it's about becoming someone who feels safe enough to be fully themselves. And that's what I'm learning right alongside you. Thanks for listening. See you next time.